So this is your final destination check for Lawyers, Guns, and Money, an introduction to legal, government, and business research. I have a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get started. So this is what I'm going to go over today. So the key word I want you to take away from this is basic. This is going to be your basic information about these things. And I do have some giveaways. The grand prize giveaway is this book, but you need to stay until the end. And unfortunately, I was too concentrated on doing a good job that I didn't think of a great way to give it away, so we'll figure that out later, you know? But I have some other treats and things like that. So that's what we're going to go over today. Whoops. Okay, so as usual, I have opinions, strong or otherwise. They are mine, my own, not of my employer, not of any group I'm affiliated with. So if you're not happy with something that I say, please take it up with me, preferably over a gin and tonic at the bar, and not have any outlash at anybody I'm involved with. So this is the managing your expectations slide. This is not a deep dive. Remember, your basic. This is not a deep dive. What I want you to think of this is OSINT speed dating. Let me be your OSINT yenta. I'm going to introduce you to a lot of different resources. Then what I want you to do is to go back on your own, dim the lights, light some candles, play some soft music, get to know these resources more intimately on your own. It'll be like butter. So why am I here talking to you today? And I do apologize that I'm sitting, but I have a knee issue, so it's not that I don't respect my audience. It's that I don't want to be in pain and want to get through this. So I apologize for sitting. So what's my street cred here? So I have a master's degree in library information science. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that probably a day doesn't go by that I don't mention this. I spent 15 years as a librarian, so I joke that I've been doing OSINT for longer than I knew it was called OSINT. I used to just call it doing my job. So I have all these research skills, legal. I spent 10 years at a law firm doing law firm librarianship. I also worked at a little company called QVC. Never heard of it. I also worked in universities. So I have a wide variety of research skills from being a librarian. I have a GSEC cert, and I work as a SOC analyst. So I feel like I'm qualified to talk to you about this today. So we got some 5 keys. Before we get into the actual subject matters of legal, government, and business, I want to give you some best practices, in my opinion, of good research and doing some OSINT research here. Our first key, that is not a place in the south of France. That's Provence. This is Provenance, but it's also a French word. It means the origin, from the original history from where something came. In Hamilton, they sang, don't forget from whence you came. So know where your information is coming from. If you need to, triangulate, if possible. Say you see something that seems too good to be true, cross-reference it, double-check things. Try to get as pure of data as you can, because that's important. Why? Well, I worked for a law firm library for 10 years. Things need to be admissible in court sometimes. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's not my situation. You might not know that. You may be asked to do some information, and then it might go up the chain and might eventually find its way to a company boardroom or a company law department or something, after, chain of custody, right? Part of InfoSec, chain of custody. Once you hand over that information, you're not entirely sure where it's going to go, so it's best to do your research thinking that it's going to wind up in court one day. There's a saying of dance like nobody's watching and write emails as if they're going to be read aloud in court one day. Do your research as if it's going to be entered as Exhibit A one day. And what does that mean exactly? So you want your provenance, and you want your citations. You want to know where you found that information, because you may need to find it again. If you're doing online research, you may use a tool like Hunchly. But if you're doing some just more basic, you might just have an Excel spreadsheet where you document from where you got that information. Because again, you may need to find it again. An example of this is, I'm not a big fan of Wikipedia. I'm sure I will get hate letters about that later. But for example, they will have a citation at the bottom of their article, but that citation doesn't exactly prove the fact that they're notating, does it? So you may need to use that as a resource to jump off into something else, but you'll still need to keep track of that, because that might be a key to finding where they actually found that information. Another one is, so who are my old people at? Who knows what a microfiche is? All right. Sometimes things are not going to be online, and you're going to actually need a real citation to go find something that's no longer available digitally. Key point number 4, money. Whatever denomination, currency it is, sometimes resources cost money to have access to. This talk, I'm going to concentrate on free and low-cost resources. Where appropriate, I will mention some of the paid resources. The reason why I concentrate on the low and cost and free is because most of you, even though you may work for a Fortune 500 company, do you think you have a budget for a LexisNexis if you're going to use it once a month? No. So you need some strategies. Even when I worked at a law firm, there were things we didn't have subscriptions to because they were cost prohibitive. So I'm concentrating on the free things. If you're really familiar with this kind of OSINT research and you're like, that's stupid, you can just go to Bloomberg Law and get that. Yeah, you can if you have an expensive subscription to it. So that's my point here, is if you already know how to do some of this stuff and you're thinking like, why didn't she use that? Maybe it costs a lot of money, and I'm trying to show you the free and low-cost ways, like I said, but I will touch upon some of the pay resources where applicable. And the last one is time management. We had a saying in the law firm library telling the attorneys, never spend more than 15 minutes researching something and then contact the library. Well, you may not have that luxury of having a librarian or a library at your disposal. So context for you is put a time limit on it when you're fruitlessly searching. Even if you just step away and have lunch and take a break, you may come back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh brain and then all of a sudden be able to find it. But I mean, there's going to be a point in time where you're just not going to be able to see anything anymore. Everything's going to blur together. So keep that in mind. If you're not finding things and you're just getting frustrated and going in cycles, just be like, all right, let me work on something else and I'll go back to it. Or if you do have the ability to reach out to a library at a university or a public library or some other information professional as a resource, then maybe, okay, after an hour, I'm going to call in the cavalry. Which kind of all comes together. Are you familiar with the quality triangle? You can only pick 2. So know going into your research what is expected of you, because that'll help you. That'll help your time management. That'll help with the finances. Know what's expected of you regarding the quality triangle. All right, let's dig in. If any of you do legal research or familiar with the law, this is laughable. I know that this is an oversimplistic view of the U.S. legal system. I just wanted to just illustrate that there's 2 different paths that lead to the Supreme Court, the court of last resort. So that's going to come in mind because you need to know the court system in which you're researching, because that's going to determine where you look. And that is called jurisdiction. Jurisdiction can be physical, but could also be a subject. If you've ever seen Legally Blonde, you know the scene where she goes and helps what's-her-face get the bulldog back, and she like rattles off all this like legal nonsense in one of his subject matter jurisdiction. That's this. Federal cases have a couple of these different requirements to be a federal case, and one of them is if it's a bankruptcy court. You can't declare divorce in a bankruptcy court. That's not that court's subject matter jurisdiction. So you need to first understand, is this a federal case or is this a state case? So these are some of the parameters that qualify for a federal court. There's some others, but these are sort of the main ones. And there's a maritime law court, which I just think is fascinating, but that's just me because I'm a dork. And then state courts are going to have different things that they cover. This last, my bullet note, yes, you will sometimes come across a case that will apply to federal and state. I never quite understood that when I was a librarian, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But I just wanted to point it out to you in case you are doing some research and you see that things have dual jurisdiction. There are some circumstances when they apply to both. Okay, so appeals. If you don't like what the lower court said, you can appeal to a higher court. The United States divides these appeals courts into circuit courts, and this is your geographic designation. Here in Rhode Island, we're in the First Circuit. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm in the Third Circuit, which inexplicably also covers the Virgin Islands, which means I do know court librarians who have gone to the Virgin Islands for work, which is pretty cool. Another thing I want to point out is the 2nd, 7th, and 9th are often considered bellwether courts. If you're familiar with the term bellwether, easy for me to say. It's just kind of a sampling of, of a consensus. So sometimes judges might, or a lawyer, I should say, would want to get cases from the 2nd, the 7th, and the 9th to kind of get an idea of what judges are ruling on for a certain type of case. So just to keep in mind, the circuit courts are divided up geographically, which again is their jurisdiction. I want to share this real quick because if you are digging into real court cases and all, so there's these things called reporters. It's when all the cases are published together, they're bound in a book or bound together on a database, and they're given these regional names. But I want you to look, so Atlantic makes sense, right? We're in Rhode Island. Rhode Island falls into the Atlantic reporter. Rhode Island touches the Atlantic Ocean. That makes sense, right? How about those famous northeastern states of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio? So the only reason why I'm showing this to you is I don't know why, but this is how they're organized. So don't pay attention so much to the name, but concentrate on the state you're looking and then figure out what the name of the reporter is. This is not intuitive, so I just wanted to share this as a little cheat sheet. All right, so pop quiz for a piece of Philadelphia candy. Can anybody tell me what the first one is? Yes?
Miranda v. Arizona was a Supreme Court decision that cemented Miranda rights.
Oh, damn, I wasn't expecting all that, but yeah. And what are the Miranda rights?
It's the rights that are read to you when you're being arrested or detained.
That's good enough. Congratulations, there you go. Okay, excellent. So like the gentleman said, so how you read this is, this is that's the volume, 384. The US means it was the Supreme Court. 436 is the section, and 1966 was the year. The other two are not as famous, so I'm not going to give away candy because we'll be here all day, people guessing. The second one was about the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. And you would read that. It's the volume is 273 of the third edition of the Federal Reporter, section 439. The decision was made in the Second Circuit. Anybody real quick name what's a state in the Second Circuit? No. Who said New York? You get some candy, sir. Can you give that to him? Excellent. Yeah, Goldenberg's is a famous Philadelphia candy here. And it was 2001. The last one has to do with a pyramid scheme. That famous northeastern state, that's the abbreviation for the Northeastern Reporter, the second edition of Indiana. The Indiana Court of Appeals, 1990. That was a pyramid scheme. And here's so like the gentleman said here, Miranda warning. So I don't know, did people know that that was a court case? Were you aware? Was that generally known? Okay. Sometimes people are like, oh, I didn't know that's what that came from. So this is just, again, speed dating. This is just a quick way how you decipher what these citations look at. All right, I have another piece of candy. Who can tell me what this Liebeck versus McDonald's? I see a hand in the back of the hat.
Is that the one with coffee?
Yes, sir. Fantastic. You get candy. Or you can come up later. Okay, let me put it over here so I don't give away your candy. Excellent. This was the hot coffee case. I think it was $11 million or something like that. The reason why I'm including this is I want to show you, I keep putting my hand in front of the slides. The citations look a little weird, right? Remember? And so this is what it looks like when proprietary databases like Lexis and Westlaw get their hands on a court case. And then it makes you hard to access it because you don't have the money to get into it. So fortunately, this one shows me the court that it was in, the New Mexico District Court. But a lot of times, especially an attorney, will only have the first part. So sometimes if you're lucky, you can just Google it and it'll give you some clues as to where to find it. But that 1995 WL, that looks like someone's password or locker combination, right? So I just want to give you a little tip. That's what that means. I wanted to point out, so you see the case was in 94, but Westlaw has it 95. That's the year they put it into their database. Isn't that sneaky? So you think you're looking for a 1994 court case, and it's in their 1995 collection. So that's how you read those things. All right. If you're really going to dig in deep to this, this is an article that I recommend that you read. It says it's for new law students, but it's basics. Yeah, basic. Remember? It's going to help you understand how to read the legal opinions, which is the judge's summary of the case. Hurry up, take your photos. I recommend this if you're definitely going to dig into legal research. Okay, so I talked a lot about case law, about court cases. If you want to get the laws of the land, one of the many resources you can do that's reputable, because remember, you want provenance, you want something good, something that's admissible. The Legal Information Institute, it's through Cornell Law School. Ivy League institution, it's free. Again, it works on that. There's that W word again, that Wikipedia model where they accept donations and things like that. It is generally considered to be a reputable source to get your online information about laws of the land, statutes, things like that. This is one you wouldn't normally think of, so I consider this a gift to all of you. There is a thing called a 50-state survey, cross-jurisdictional resources. So say you want to start a company and you want to figure out which state is best to start it in and which state maybe has the most favorable, which are probably crappy, labor laws to your company, and you want to compare them side by side. There are these resources where they will take a subject like labor law, and compare them side by side. People can do these on their own. I've seen blogs where people do it. Publishers will make these as well in books. Sometimes there'll be databases where you can just easily click things. I just wanted to point out that this is something that I don't think non-librarian, non-legal researchers typically know about. But there are these 50-state surveys where you can find out what a certain type of law is like across different states. I think it's a pretty cool resource. All right, so now how do you get your hands on some of these actual court cases? So because we're here in Rhode Island, I wanted to give an example. If you want to search Rhode Island case law in court cases, you go to their site, and that's the site there. Now, some websites will require registration, and I know some of you like to be anonymous online, so adjust your registration accordingly. Some will make you pay. I know a lot of Florida courts will make you pay. And some will make you give a reason as to why you're searching for that information. So be prepared and just kind of scope it out first and figure out how you want to handle that. So again, if you want to search something local to you, honestly, just Google the court, Pennsylvania court, or a Philadelphia court, or something like that. Just figure out which court you're looking for. It's easy enough to find. But I just want to use Rhode Island as an example. And so you're like, okay, great, Tracy, thanks, but I want federal stuff. All right, quick show of hands. Who knows Pacer? Have you used Pacer before? Excellent. Okay, more hands than I was expecting, so kudos. This is going to be all of those federal documents, all those federal court cases. So it does require registration. So it's technically 10 cents a page, but, tip, if you spend less than $15 in a quarter being 3 months, there's no charge. So it's really best if you just have a credit card on file. I've had an account for with Pacer for years. I've never gotten a charge because I've never used it enough. So I have heard that there's a way that you can also have invoices generated, but if you don't get those invoices paid, I did read a horror story where it was against somebody's credit report and all that stuff. So just find something to keep online if you're going to be doing a lot of research. But there is a way to get Pacer for free. If you want to. And I know 10 cents a page doesn't sound like a lot, but do you know how big some of these cases can be? So here's a tip. A lot of government websites I have found don't necessarily have time to actually update the site, but they have time to have a blog with an update. So always check the website's blog portion to see if there's any updates. I did that for Pacer. If you are doing scholarly research for federal cases, I think we have some college students here, you can request an exemption. If you are a social engineer, I'm sure you can figure out a way to make yourself a college student to get an exemption. I just wanted to point out that there are many ways to get this information for free, despite all the costs on the site. And also, I have found that Firefox is really the best way to get that form to submit the application. I tried to use Chrome to open it, and it was kind of a nightmare. So I didn't want you to think I was a liar and you use Chrome and I can't find this site. It's not coming up for me. Well, use Firefox because I don't know, Chrome doesn't work with it. All right. Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay. That is the phrase that opens up the Supreme Court when they are in session. So if you want to go right to the source, the provenance, if you will, of the Supreme Court, you can go to supremecourt.gov. You'll get all kinds of instructional information as well as the court cases and things like that. But if you go to those sources on the other side of the page, that's going to give you context, commentary. It's going to be a little bit more user-friendly, especially if you're not well-versed in the legal world. These are great sites to follow if there are like landmark decisions being made in the Supreme Court, because they will do live blogging, live tweeting, live commentary, and help kind of make everything make sense. So I've talked a lot about online things. So I hate to burst your bubble. I know it's 2019, but some places don't have court documents online. Usually it's because it's cost prohibitive from them. I know, for example, a lot of counties in Kentucky do not have digitization because they can't, afford it. It's not a priority for them. So you have to get what's called a court runner or just a runner. There are companies that exist that you pay them, and they will go to a court and sit there and wait for a clerk to photocopy everything for you. You can do it yourself and save the couple $100 fees, but in my experience, it's best to hire a company because they usually have ins with the court, maybe winks, nudges, maybe can kind of get ahead of the line a little bit. But I just wanted to point this out to keep in mind, not everything's online. You may have to go in person or hire someone to go in person. And if you're going to be spending a lot of time looking at court stuff, I have 2 books to recommend. The Blue Book, it's just called the Blue Book. It's not like the Kelly Blue Book for cars. It's the Blue Book. In law, they refer to things by colors a lot, but there could be 10 different things that's a yellow book. So make sure you have clarification. This is about $30. It is available online. It's also available on print. It's 4 different prestigious university law schools that come together, and it'll help you write and read legal citations. Now, keep in mind the law is filled with a lot of Latin terms and also filled with a lot of English terms that have very different meanings in the context of law. So to make sure that you know what's really going on, I recommend something like Black's Law Dictionary. My giveaway for today is not Black's Law Dictionary, but it's Dictionary of Legal Terms with definitions and explanations for non-lawyers. I thought for this session, this would be a more appropriate giveaway. But the good thing about Black's Law Dictionary is that most public and academic libraries most likely have one on the shelf for you to look at. I believe this is also available online, partially for free. I think there's an unabridged version that costs money, but make sure you know the terminology. Don't assume you know what a word means, because it may have a very different meaning in law. Law books, they're not dead yet, despite what you may think. This is an actual photo from a fancy hotel in Texas that decided to use old law books as decoration, which I found hilarious. And I've seen actually a lot of like hipster bars and things like that, like use law books, and it just cracks me up, and I'm like, that's just silly to me. But anyway, they're still around. Where do you get them? There are such a things called private law libraries. There's the Social Law Library in Boston. Law schools have libraries with books, because remember, not everything might be digitized, or it might be cheaper for you to pay a nominal fee to get into a library to look at a bunch of print books than it is for you to try and figure out how to access it online. So again, sorry, I'm from Philadelphia, so I give a Philadelphia reference. Jenkins Law Library. So for $5, you can go in for the day. You can get an hour online. You can do all of your pre-texting to keep it with the theme of the conference. You can do all your information ahead of time and be ready to go in 1 hour, sit there and go through and look at Westlaw and Lexis and all that stuff. So figure out what your private law libraries and what your law school libraries near you offer for people not affiliated. This is actually printed by a company called the Rhode Island Press, and I just thought that was a nice divine providence here of this here. I jokingly call this the Yelp of law books. This is an excellent resource. It's about $100, $120. It's a really thick book, also good to use as a defense mechanism because it is pretty thick. This is going to go through and give you legal resources and describe them and also give some reviews. So this is a great resource. If you don't know where to look for something, figure out, say, I want Michigan law, but I want to know what books are best for Michigan law, or I want gambling law. What are the best books for gambling law? This is going to help cut down some of that research time. It's going to give you, suggestions and recommendations, and give you all the information you need, the ISBN number, all that stuff. So take a look at this book here. So say you just want news. Again, there's plenty of places you can go to pay for news. These are some free ones. Keep in mind that the law moves as agilely as a cruise ship, which is not very, it doesn't turn very fast or very quickly, especially if you're researching anything to do with cybersecurity or technology law. Expect the articles to be delightfully out of date. That's, oh, that's cute. They just covering WannaCry now. Oh. Just adjust your expectations if you're trying to get articles like this about anything tech-related. It seems to be a little bit slower, but these are some free resources. Some require registration, but it is still free. So you're like, okay, great, thanks, Tracy, but I want to look outside the US. Since I don't have copious amounts of time, I just want to do this briefly. The key phrase here, Legal Information Institute. You already saw it once, right? There's a good chance that a country or a region will have some sort of legal information institute that's going to have great resources. So you can have some here. This is going to help you with the actual like case law and the legislation. If it may not be a direct link, it just may be information to where you can get that information. So this is a good starting point. And then I have to mention Law Library Congress is a phenomenal free resource. With all, you can get the Constitution for Zambia for free on these sites and get a lot of information. GlobalX is through New York University Law School and is also a well-known, excellent source for non-US information. All right, let's move on to government. This used to be called fdsys.gov, in case you were familiar with that. It's now called gov.info. Anytime the US government publishes something, and this is, say, congressional hearings, congressional schedules, anything to do with the Department of Agriculture, it's going to go through the GPO, the Government Publishing Office. Any and all of that is on gov.info, govinfo.gov. I thought it's just such a terrible name. Anyway, this is what it looks like. They give you multiple ways to find the information. Sorry, I feel like when I turn this way, my sound goes out, so I'm not ignoring the peanut gallery here. I just want to make sure I'm heard on the thing. So anyway, so they give you some real user-friendly ways to find information. So you're thinking, like, well, what could possibly interest me on the govinfo.gov site? Well, there's the U.S. Code, the permanent laws of the U.S. Have you ever been unsure of what to do with an American flag, of how to fly it, how to fold it, how to display it? You go to the first one. You go to Title IV of the U.S. Code, Section 5, and how civilians should display the flag. So I listed the citations for the U.S. Code can appear in different ways, so I gave you some variations. And the last one sounds like a movie from Cinemax, but it's not. But I just thought it was nice. And I actually have the print version of an older version of the liquor law. It's of the U.S. Code because I'm a nerd, but it was, somebody was throwing away a bunch of old U.S. Code books. I'm like, and it's called Intoxicating Liquors. It's called Title 27, Intoxicating Liquors. I used to keep it on my, my desk when I was at the law firm. CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. So this is, again, what the Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, it's the things that they, the rules that they go by. And again, I'm going to show you different ways. There's that funky double S there, that means section. If you come across it, these are online, but you'll also see them in print. Every year, a CFR is given a different color. I was told that 2019 is like a chocolate brown. And why is this important? This gives, just by color, and unfortunately, if you're colorblind, this isn't very helpful, but if you can see color, you can tell quickly which books are current and which books are out of date, because the titles of the CFR are broken up into different sections, and not all the sections are updated at the same time. So you see how there's some magenta mixed in with the turquoise there? That means that so the turquoise, based on this, I would say the turquoise is the newer one, and that one title there on that shelf has a couple volumes that haven't been updated yet. So again, just fun fact. And the reason why I mention it, because it's not only in print, but online, sometimes you'll see a little square with a color next to it, and that's what that means. There's a specific color for each year. And side note, it was always great fun to find out every year what the color was, because in the librarian community, you'd be like, what color is it this year? 2018 was a horrible gray. I heard all about that. Even though I'm not in that world anymore, I still care about what the CFR color is. You may not know the source exists, but it does. Again, if you want more information, again, specifically about, say, like Department of Agriculture, USA.gov has all kinds of stuff for free that I think is a really underutilized resource. I really don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So what else can you find on a government website? People know what the USPTO is? Are you familiar with patents and trademarks? So why would you care about this? Why would you want to search this site? Well, say you want to do some competitive intelligence, or maybe you want to, maybe you're looking to work for a certain company. You kind of want to see, well, what sort of technology do they have in the pipeline? So because we can't decide if cybersecurity is one word or two, I did a sample search of cyber and security. And it should surprise no one that Splunk has a patent there for this technology. USPTO site is very good. You can also see what things have been denied. You can see there's a wealth of information, and so there's tons of competitive intelligence information here. If you just want to know what technologies are coming down the pike, see what patents and trademarks have been approved. That's going to give you a key to what's coming. And side note, if you're going to get really into the patent world, this is like this weird, they're not weird, but there's this like patent underground of really intense researchers and librarians that know patents really well. So I just want to point this out. If you're going to get into heavy-duty patent research, get to know these people. They also have an amazing international patent database. Something like you have to register a patent in each different country, and sometimes they'll expire at different times and all this stuff. So this is I think they call themselves PUIG, or it's just PIUG. But if you're into patents, that's your group. Okay, so what if you want to search for some governments outside the U.S.? So a couple things here. Hey, TLDs, top-level domains. It's a good idea to kind of know some of them, or at least know how to Google them. I can't say this for every country, but for a lot of countries, this is their main domain for their government information is just going to be gov. And their TLD. So we have Brazil, Jamaica, and Cayman Islands. So true story, an attorney was like, I was looking for 3 hours for the Cayman Islands labor code. I did a Google dork, site:/gov.ky space labor with a U. File type :PDF, had it for him in 2 seconds. It took him 3 hours and couldn't find it. I'm like, you're welcome. Know your translations. In Spanish, government is with a B, not a V. So for Chile, it's gob.cl. And Chile happens to have a government website in English as well as Spanish. You will find that some countries around the world will have their government sites in languages other, if they have, Switzerland has 4 native languages, 4 official languages, they'll have all 4. If you're not fluent in Spanish, but say you need to check out some sites on Chile, then check out English. Obviously, with translations, it's always best to look in the native language first, but if you're not comfortable doing non-English language research, know that some countries have that. And then also, try not to think US-centric all the time. We call things Department of Labor, Department of Justice. Other countries may say ministry or some other terminology. So again, if you're looking for one term and you're not finding it, try to use a different term. All right, so permit me this. This is not government, but I didn't know where else to put this, and I really wanted to share this. So if you want to know where Meghan Markle's going to be, the British royals have these 2 websites, the Court Circular and the other. It's called the Court Circular collectively. So you can search past and future events of where the royal family's going to be. This actually came in handy because I had a coworker once who was teasing that there was something royal going on with their workplace, and I was able to go to the site and say, oh, you're getting a visit from Prince Charles. And he was like, how did you know that? I'm like, because I know the Court Circular website. So, all right, let's do some business research. Here are some expensive resources. Private companies are difficult to research because they're private. They're not required to report to the SEC the same type of things that a public company is. So these companies do have these databases have public company information, but more so they're kind of known as the go-to places for private companies. So again, if you are doing some hardcore private company research, it will behoove you, Hoovers, get it, behoove, to invest in this if it's something you're going to be using a lot. Now I have some free and low-cost tips for researching private companies. So first part is shameless plug for my blog, OSINT Goodness. My 3rd blog post was about the site BizJournals. and basically how to use it to your advantage. I have another blog post about the site called Zawya, ZAWYA.com. They have a really great database about private companies, and that's specific for the Middle East and North Africa. Eventually, it'll make you log into their pay database, but the free part actually gives you quite a bit of information. So it's ZAWYA.com. Glassdoor, you might be wondering, why is Glassdoor in there? Are you familiar with Glassdoor? It's like the grievance. Well, it's supposed to be, what it's like to work there, but it's the Festivus Airing of Grievances website. And why is that important? Well, a disgruntled or even just, happy employee might divulge some information on Glassdoor, that might be crucial to finding out something about a private company. So you might hit a gold mine of something that someone intentionally or unintentionally listed. And then I'm going to dig into the Securities Exchange Commission in a few slides, but there's a form called 13E.3 or -3. If a company was once public that went private, they have to file a form and explain why. So the information about them before they went private might be available. It might be a good foundation for resources and research if you're trying to get information about a private company. So there's this thing called a DUNS number through Dun & Bradstreet. Every physical location of a company has a unique DUNS number. That's important to remember. So, a company like Apple, if there are multiple individual unique geographic locations, they will all have their own DUNS number. It's basically just, it's just a code, that's assigned to that physical location so that you can find it later. This never, ever happened when I was a law firm librarian, but say an attorney gives you a DUNS number and says, I would like all the information about this company. That never happened. But if someone happens to give you a DUNS number, that's what that is. It's a specific location of that company. And then if you see a report, some of these business reports, you'll have the NAICS and you'll have the SIC number. So the DUNS number, again, I said, is the unique identifier. The NAICS is an industry classification system. So say you, again, remember 50 state surveys from the law? Say you want to find other companies in the same space and you want to make sure you're doing apples to apples, compare NAICS numbers. And the NAICS numbers are used for US, Canada, Mexico. One thing I want to mention about the DUNS number, this really only applies to government people, but the US government decided to get rid of DUNS numbers and then create this whole new unique system. I tweeted at Dun & Bradstreet to ask if this was going to be in the private world or if they're changing what they're doing. DUNS numbers are still going to exist, but it's just that for government purposes, there's going to be this whole new system created, and that is the extent that I know about that. This is very new news. So if that affects your world, you may already be familiar with this. If you're going to be doing some government-related research, you want to make sure you're familiar with this. And then funny thing about this SIC code, technically, it was supposed to have been phased out, but it's still used a lot. So if you see it, that's what it means. And I've heard that a lot of international companies still utilize the SIC code. So again, if you see it pop up in your research, that's what it is. And there's definitely websites where you can go to understand what the code is, what type of industry and business it's relating to. Just trying to clear up some of these acronyms you're going to see when you do research that you're not like, what is this magical thing here? All right, so let's dig in a little bit more to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I would like you to meet EDGAR. EDGAR is a free database where you can search all the filings, all the fun filings of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And you're like, wow, Tracy, I don't have insomnia. Why would I care about that? Well, and I've tweeted about this like 2 or 3 times already. What is the something that a company might have to disclose that would interest the information security world? Thank you, yes. So, case in point, 2 weeks ago, Quest. How did everyone find out about it? Because they filed an 8K saying that they had a breach. This is how journalists find out about it. They monitor the SEC and for the 8Ks. So you can go on the SEC website. I'm sure that there's alerts you can set up or things like that. But if you want to see what a company's up to, even if they're investing in cybersecurity, figure out which search terms. They also may be clever and may not call it a breach. They might call it a cyber incident or something. They might want to fly under the radar. So again, if you're trying to check out a company to see, maybe they're asking for cybersecurity insurance, and maybe you don't think they're being really forthcoming about stuff, search their 8Ks because they have to release those. So I was so excited, believe me, when I saw that this came out and every news source was saying that, because it was in the 8K, I'm like, I told people to search that. I'm like, I told you. See, I wasn't making it up. It's good. So again, international. Edgar exists around the world, but it's just not called Edgar. I'm not even going to attempt what it's called in Germany, but pretty much every country is going to have their version of Edgar. It may or may not be as useful. Obviously, 8K isn't going to translate, but I just wanted to make you aware that other countries have something similar. So if you're trying to find a German company that had a cybersecurity incident or something like that, and they're a public company, then you need to go to that U word and figure out what to look for. So I wanted to mention now, this is sort of a medium-priced resource. I believe it's $100 a month. You may have to get the blessing from the owner to get a subscription. It's a very kind of wonky private system, but it's called Scoop. That's how that's pronounced. It used to be free, so when it was free for me, this is a search that I did. In one fell swoop, it's going to give you SEC filings, patents, and federal cases. How cool is that? So, for example, I typed in the word cybersecurity, and the light bulb or some patents, but what did I find? That Finjan Holdings filed an 8K with the word cybersecurity in it. So bingo. So again, if this is something that you're going to be doing a lot, if you're a freelancer, that you're going to be able to provide better value for your clients, it might be worth the investment. So I just want to make you aware that this site exists. Let's go back to free. Twitter is a wealth of information. I have a separate hour-long talk that I give about finding information on Twitter. If you were aware that there is an advanced search screen on Twitter, that's where if you weren't aware, I should say, that's where it is. The SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, they have an enforcement division. That's where they do their litigation. They have their own Twitter handle. So guess what? /SEC, that's the handle, SEC_enforcements, filter links, that's going to give you a PDF to the SEC litigation. You could go to the SEC litigation website and try to find it. Mazel tov, try to, if you can figure that out. It's a lot quicker to go to Twitter and figure it out. $, anybody? What company is that? Thank you, very good. Sometimes it's easy just to figure out, so what sort of things will affect a company's stock price and financial health? A recall. And it's a lot easier to search by the stock market name sometimes because a lot of the business resources might reference it. So it's easy to pull that up. So I don't know if you knew that, but that's a search term you can use on Twitter is $, and the stock market name. If you don't know the stock market name of the company, just Google it real quick. You'll get it, and then just save it. That's all you need. All right. Now let's start to transition into economic research. So you know how weather is daily, but climate is more long-term? Well, business would be daily, economic would be more long-term. So if you want some more long-term financial information, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is a really great source. One of these things you can look at too is if you're job hunting, there's a lot of times that there's average salaries and things like that to look for. Again, for our industry, it might not be up to date, but you can get a lot of information from it. So you met Edgar, and now I would like you to meet Fred. Fred is a free database all about economic research from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. Again, free resource that I don't think people know about, but if you need to do economic research, it's there for you. So now, that was a lot of information. You might be like this boxer and be a little sleepy. And I actually finished with more time because I kind of sped through this. So I'm happy to give away some stuff. I'm thinking for the giveaway, should we do person who came the furthest? That seem fair? So shout out if you think you came the furthest. Spokane? Yeah. Spokane? Can anybody beat Spokane? Going once? Going twice? All right, the lady from Spokane won. Thank you. I figured that was fair. So we still have a couple more minutes. Does anybody have questions? I see a hand in the back. Yes.
How do you search for like DBAs and associations or like trade names that someone may be using as like a shell or holding?
Well, one of the best ways to do that is some of those paid resources, to be honest, Hoover's and Dun & Bradstreet. And actually, that reminds me. So let me give you some tips of how I promised this earlier. And I'm glad you asked that question because that reminded me. So there is a resource, a website. It's called the Mechanics Institute and Library in San Francisco. I think it's just milibrary.org, but it's Mechanics Institute and Library, which I know doesn't sound like they have resources, but trust me, they do. This is what they have. You become a member of their library. It's about $100 a year. You have access to their online databases like those expensive private company databases that I mentioned. You can just use it remotely. So I had a subscription when I briefly had my own research business, and I had access to Hoover's, Dun & Bradstreet, Mergent, things like that. So for like $100, $120 a year, you can have online access to that. Your local library, Philadelphia Free Library, for example, out of state, I believe it's $50 a year. But if you're a resident of Pennsylvania, you can get a library card. And a lot of times, public libraries, it might be limited, but you will have access to some business databases that will get you some of this information. There's, obviously I'm biased because I come from library world, but I want to, and some of you might be like, all right, we get it, you're a librarian, like, you move on. But I just don't know that people really realize what wealth of information is available to you through a public library, through an academic library. If you are an alumna or alumnus, my Latin is failing, alumnus of an academic institution, as a graduate, you may be eligible to have access to their databases. I know that as a Penn Stater, I have the ability to use some of their online resources. Now, you should read the terms and conditions, and I know I'm probably going to snicker because I'm in a room full of social engineers, but you have so many resources available to you, and that's where you're going to get access to the DBAs and things like that through some of those databases. Another thing I want to mention is because the tax laws are favorable to be registered in Delaware, a lot of businesses will register in Delaware. So it's helpful to search Delaware courts, like the Delaware Chancery Court, to find business information about a company. Their presence in Delaware may just be a P.O. box or some rundown house, that maybe they bought out as a shell or whatever. If you ever saw Fight Club, which I know we're not supposed to talk about, but that was set in Delaware. Everybody got that, right? It was all about like the credit card companies. Yeah, like Delaware is where things are registered. So if you are having a hard time finding business information about a company where it says that their headquarters are, go to the first state, the Diamond State, the Blue Hen State, and check their websites, check the Chancery Court, check their information, because you are likely to find some of their real information because they are registered there. Oops, I want to show this too. I have a Nuzzle newsletter. I have two. One is specifically about InfoSec news, but the stuff that's not in the headlines, some of the stuff that kind of flies under the radar, it's daily-ish. Don't hold me to that. I didn't get one done today. I also do one that's specifically for Africa because that's an interest of mine as an emerging cybersecurity resource and threat resource, brother, sister, everything. There's a lot of good stuff technology-wise coming out of Africa, so I do a separate blog about that. And then I just also have my straight-up blog about OSINT, where I have a couple different posts. One of my latest ones is how to utilize wedding announcements to get information. Because people post way too much information in wedding announcements. And I don't mean to sound sexist, but maybe some guys don't realize that the New York Times is like the pinnacle of newspapers to get a wedding announcement in. And it is a treasure trove of information. There's also a website called The Knot, I think, yeah. And one of the maids of honor in someone's wedding, works in cybersecurity, and that was posted on The Knot. It was like, oh, and my maid of honor is named so-and-so and works in cybersecurity, and these are her likes. And I was like, oh, On my blog, I have blotted out the name, but so that's some information there. So trying to think of, and I want to give, so I have one more. So does anybody remember what the, no, without Google it, don't look it up, what was the top level domain KY? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Thank you.
One quick question.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, with the internet and the information on the internet being a daily part of our lives, can you speak about library science and what is happening?
In 5 minutes? Oh shoot! I apologize. I didn't repeat the questions before. So I'm sorry. What's the crux of your question about how library science?
Library science and the value of it, and is it still, what you did, what you do, is it still? I mean, we're all librarians now. I mean, we all.
Oh no. Sorry. No. I worked hard. I worked hard on that Master's of Library and Information Science degree. Now, to your point, there is no official U.S. designation of what makes a librarian. But sorry, that cut a little deep there. You could say that you are a curator of information or a steward of information. But sorry, I earned my librarian title. Yeah. Other countries do have official designations. I believe Canada and the UK have specific things that you need to pass that makes you officially a librarian. But to one way or another, we all are curators and stewards of information. But I would say this industry is more consumers of information, especially OSINT. You're a consumer of it. The people who are the producers are all the people who have open accounts, who post way too much information. So I realized that I have this unique skill set that wasn't really active in InfoSec, so that's why I made my career pivot about 3 years ago to get into this world, because I realized information organization and the more structured ways of finding things was something that was probably lacking. Because I'm always surprised when I submit a talk like this, or people are like, hey, can you talk to us more about finding stuff? And I think, people don't already how to do that? And then people say, no, we don't know how to do that. So I try to impart some wisdom that I have from my 15 years as a librarian. Hope that helps. So we're running out on time here. I know this is odd, but I made cornbread. It was meant for the volunteers. There weren't enough volunteers. So if you want a big chunk of cornbread, there's a couple of them here. And we gave away the thing, and we have the gentleman in the back. I still have your peanut chew. And again, just to close with, thank you for attending. I think you are all smart people. That's why I gave you a bunch of Smarties. If you did not get a Smartie, please come